start, you start, right?
Yes.
You say
No,
hello.
just for a welcome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, right.
And ask people to come on back.
That'd be good. But you know, they're kind of
They're all right. They're fine. They're situated. All right. They're fine.
You open the stream on it?
Yeah. 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 Seems like it was just
Oh, okay. Now it's confirmed this way. I take it back.
We're audio live.
okay. One of them is Tony G. That's the other one is. Oh yeah. That's it. Yeah, but theirs is yes. Theirs is just about what's coming forward.
No, I sent out the kayak. And Julie goes, I got like six emails from her. And I went, oh crap. 'Cause I accidentally did a copy and paste from 21 and that was Julie. I am breaking.
You ready for him?
And then
Well, when Kale's ready, he'll come down and get us situated.
Waiting on Cal.
we will need handheld.
Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Test 3 4. Test 3 4. Thanks everybody for your patience. We're almost set.
Stop the mics.
Yeah, don't talk anymore. Why don't you go ahead and station yourself up there somewhere so that you're back here? No. Up there. Oh, with the hand. Sorry.
Okay, thanks. We're good.
We need the handheld, so wait a second.
Aren't these the handhelds?
We need them down here.
Handheld mics. Thank you.
Good morning. Welcome, everyone. We are here for the open meeting to ask questions, have observations, hear your comments with our candidate for settled minister, Reverend Nathan Dannison. So glad everybody's here and participating. We have people in live stream. We have people who've submitted questions beforehand, and we'll put it open to questions and comments for everyone who's here live. So I just want to go over one logistical issue, and that is because this is being videotaped and recorded and it's live stream, the AV staff has asked that we, Committee on Ministry, that is, oh, by the way, I should have said this first, I'm Jan Mann, and everyone else will introduce themselves as well. We are going to ask the questions into the mic, and that means that when you have a question or comment, just wave, and someone will come to you, get your name, your question, or whatever you want to have said, and then they will speak it into the microphone so that the video works well, the live stream people can hear. So we're going to be very jealous about the microphones. We're not going to hand anyone a microphone. So that is really the main logistical issue. Mark, where are you? Mark Fitzpatrick. He will be one of the handheld mics, and Jack Petit.
Wave, Jack.
All right, so they will be kind of stationed up around there. And without further ado, we are going to do a short introduction and then open up the questioning. The first question will be one the Committee on Ministry will put to Nathan Dannison, and then we will open it up for everyone. So we're going to start with Henry Matthews.
Hello, my name is Henry Matthews. I'm a member of your committee, and I'd like to give you a very brief summary of how we got here today. So, as you know, we have an interim minister. We've gotten to know him, we've gotten to admire him and watch him a great deal, and we know about his great talents. We, the committee, when you selected us to be that committee, have accepted his request to be considered to be the minister, and we've looked at it in great depth. We have read his resume in great depth. We have discussed amongst ourselves on a number of endless meetings. They've been a lot of fun. And we have also talked to the candidate himself in depth twice, and have determined as a committee 100% that we recommend him to you, the congregation. Now it's your turn to ask him some questions, and it's your turn to vote, and that will tell us whether he will be our minister. And if not, then we have to continue our job and seek other candidates. That's what I wanted to tell you and how we got here now. Ruth.
Thank you, Henry. I'm Ruth Stein. I'm also on the committee. Set down my water. Okay. I have for your consideration Nathan's professional bio, or a version of it. I will say in advance, if you've been listening to the sermons, then virtually none of this is going to be new to you, but we're making a hiring decision, and a professional bio is an appropriate thing to have. So Reverend Nathan Scott Dannison is an ordained minister in the United Church of Christ with nearly 20 years of service in 8 congregations across Michigan and Tennessee. He currently serves as interim minister of Fountain Street Church in Grand Rapids and holds standing in the Michigan Conference of the United Church of Christ. A 7th-generation West Michigander, Nathan studied political science, comparative religion, and applied ethics at Western Michigan University before earning his Master of Divinity with honors from Chicago Theological Seminary. His ministry has consistently brought together worship, justice, and community organizing, from launching day shelters and children's programs to training leaders for public action. Nathan is a universalist whose theology integrates insights from multiple faith traditions, the sciences, and the arts. He approaches sacred texts allegorically and serves non-creedal, interreligious congregations where seekers of all backgrounds can engage questions of meaning, truth, and belonging in an atmosphere of intellectual and spiritual freedom. He previously served as senior minister of First Congregational Church of Kalamazoo, where the congregation grew significantly in membership and budget, completed major restoration projects, and became a hub for arts, recovery ministries, and immigrant justice, including providing long-term sanctuary and advocacy for a neighbor facing deportation. For 3 years, Nathan led the effort to protect Sahida Nadim while she resided entirely within the church. Beyond the parish, Nathan served as an emergency medical technician with the Palestine Red Crescent in the West Bank, assisting in their mission to save lives and serve humanity under military occupation. Nathan has served on numerous civic and nonprofit boards and now serves on the board of directors of Planned Parenthood of Michigan. He has won numerous awards and fellowships for his writing, preaching, and justice work, and was named the Chicago Theological Seminary's Alumnus of the Year in 2017. He describes his call simply: to practice empathy, build beloved community, and trust that there is still great beauty and light yet to break forth from our historic churches and the people who inhabit them. Nathan lives in Alto, Michigan with his spouse, Dr. Heather Dannison, and their 3 spirited children, Josephine, Theodore, and Natalie.
With that, we'd like to welcome Reverend Nathan Scott Dannison, our candidate for settled minister. Nathan, the first question, and this is really one of the first questions that the Committee on Ministry had as well when we first interviewed you, and that is, could you please describe your journey from your call to be an interim minister here to where we are today, and that is your decision to seek a settled minister position.
Thank you very much. And I also want to take just to recognize the work that your Committee on Ministry, your church's search committee, invested in this process. They are wonderful people, and my decision to candidate was influenced by the caliber of individuals and how they represent the astounding diversity of Fountain Street Church. And every program in the life of this church, they brought all of that to bear on the interview process as well. Within about 6 months of coming here, I realized that I had I hadn't misunderstood the assignment, but I had misunderstood the polity and history of the congregation. When I was first exploring the idea of bringing the interim toolkit to Fountain Street Church, my first response was, they are Unitarian Universalists, and that is a very specific kind of process. And then I was very quickly told by many people who are smarter and older than me that I was wrong and that they're not, and that that's what everybody gets wrong about them. And that piqued my interest. I had too many assumptions and didn't know enough. What I discovered here was a congregation of seekers. This church blossomed into hospitality with a sort of speed and urgency that I hadn't encountered in other settings where I brought this same toolkit. So then there was that, coupled with the urgency of this moment, the opportunity that is presented to this church from a professional perspective. This city needs Fountain Street Church to become and step back into its role as an engine for cultural production and community organizing for justice and radical hospitality and incubating arts programs and education. The city needs that. Since really the end of COVID, there are other mainline churches, other liberal churches in this city that have had the opportunity to pick up that mantle and run with it, and they have not done so. Because of that, and because I am a son of this city, there is some part of me that has to happen. That has to happen, and it has to happen, not just now, it has to happen 2 years ago. And Fountain Street is the church that's going to do that. So there is that piece as well. And so you have embraced the practices of radical hospitality. And because of that, this has affirmed that I do have a particular skill set and set of gifts that have worked elsewhere that I believe will blossom in this setting. Your church staff at every turn have impressed me. It is great to have really great church staff, and one of the things I'm most proud about when I candidate with churches and I talk to search committees is that I have extremely high metrics on staff retention. I don't lose staff. I come into churches where there's been a lot of turnover, and I put a stop to it. And this church, right out of the gate, attracted some of the most high-caliber church staff in this part of the country. You should be very proud of that. And then your current lay leadership. So the members of this church who are volunteering their time are some of the finest human beings I have ever had the opportunity to work with. They are creative, they're tough, they work with a sense of urgency, and they have very high expectations for you, for this church, for the city, for the staff. So this is a church of high expectations. The switch was flipped when I saw the way in which you received my family. That is something that is different from previous settings that I've been in. From the moment I met Heather, made it clear I am a minister, and that is not her job. She's not part of the deal. And though she's welcome to if she wishes to, she doesn't have to darken the door of any church that I serve. And I extend that to my kids as well. They love it here. And the kindness that you have shown them has been unusual. has been wonderful. That is when I began to understand at a very deep level that this could be our home. With that being said, there is yet some work to do to close out this interim process. There is a final interim report that needs doing, reviewing, and publishing by the governing board. But you've done really well in this interim process. You've made some very painful and difficult challenges. Having done well in an interim process is an indication of health. It's something that is indicative of churches that are ready for a long-term settled ministry. So all of these things taken together have made this into a church that I would be seeking for a settled call. Though there are many big, beautiful, liberal, broken churches in the U.S., especially in the Midwest right now, especially following the pandemic, which was the main thing that seemed to have broken our churches. I was and have been fully open to a settled call for the last 5 years. So that is the rubric, the metric by which I chose to candidate here. Your search committee confirmed the things that I believed were true. And so that's what brings us to today.
Thank you, Nathan. My name is Kathy Nice, and I'm a member of the Committee on Ministry. Despite my name, I have sometimes been told that I'm not nice. So I'm asking you to follow the rules, and we'll all get out alive.
Is this
all
mine?
right? Do we have a question?
Thank you. Yes.
So,
I think you're very nice, Kathy.
but we have to record it.
Okay, we have a question here from Aaron Wiesner, and the question is to you, Nathan. What was your religious upbringing during your time at home with your parents? And the second portion of the question is, what was your journey from there to your current faith?
What was my religious upbringing? I was brought up by very progressive people, radicals, academics, thinkers. Probably their highest religious value was that their children think for themselves. However, it was important to both my parents that we paid homage to the faith traditions that came with them, namely Reformed Judaism, and also my father's peculiar attraction to congregationalism, his understanding that congregationalism was the seedbed from which grew the Boston Tea Party and the United States Constitution and town hall meetings and ultimately democracy. So we would participate at Park Church, and he would also bring me to different churches if he perhaps didn't like the preaching. I sat up there once as a child, and we would also celebrate and acknowledge High Holy Days at home and through the rabbinic work of Rabbi Al Lewis in the community. Then in college, really sort of high school and college, I was an atheist. And I knew that there was conservative Christianity in West Michigan, especially where we grew up on the south side of Kent County. But my parents were really great at kind of playing whack-a-mole with the different young life stuff that would pop up and try to make its way into our house. So I was pretty blessedly insulated from a lot of that stuff. But in college, at Western, I was a poli-sci major because I was going to go to law school, and I started taking comparative religion classes and got really sucked into that program by Nancy Falk and some other people who taught at that school. And so I ended up getting an entire degree in comparative religion just because I couldn't stop taking those classes. And then it was immediately following my graduation, my undergrad, that I went through a season of hell, death of my father, loss of a job, displacement, that sort of thing, when something happened, something shifted in my relationship with reality, and all of the things that I had felt were sort of these sober, sterile philosophical positions kind of were washed away by an overwhelming sense that the world is much simpler and also somehow much larger than we might think. And I decided to turn my life upside down and pursue empathy and community and sacrificial love and nonviolent resistance as a religion, which is embodied in the life and death of Jesus of Nazareth, who was raised in a sort of Jewish situation, and but he wasn't very good at being a Jew, apparently, is what they say. And that moment, though, I also had men stepping into my life after the death of my father and kind of taking me by the hand, and then I got to seminary, and I had also met many Christians during my work in the protest movement, beginning in 2002, 2003, 2004. Most of them were radical leftist Catholics, and some Anabaptists, some anarchists, and others. And I just thought that they were religious because the local priest paid for the bus tickets or whatever. But I heard, I met the Berrigans. I met Daniel Berrigan, and he helped me understand a couple things. And then I heard John Deere preaching, and that just convicted me. But I was able to sort of push it off and keep it back for a couple years. So that's sort of how I got here. And then when you get to Chicago, the doors start to just blow open, and you meet religious people from all over the world. And none of them are dogmatic or creedal. All of them are brilliant. And the seminary is stacked. The professors, all of them have suffered, have been persecuted, who have traveled and are ready to teach. Of course, I still didn't want to become a minister, so I became a community organizer. And then just spent way too much time in some of the churches that I was supposed to be organizing. And then there we go, we're off to the races. Yeah.
Thank you, Nathan. Do we have another question? Raise your hands, raise them high. There's one over here somewhere. I see pointing, I don't see the hand. In the meantime, while you're getting the courage to raise your hand, Jan will read a question that we received via email.
Thanks, Kathy. This came in this morning, and it is from Tony G. He says, Laniga? Oh, it says Tony G on here. It is Tony Laniga. Good afternoon. I would like to raise a concern with the selection process of the new minister. To be clear, this is not an objection to the selection of Reverend Dannison, but simply a concern for the process. It is my understanding that no other candidate was given consideration, that no other candidate was interviewed. Given that, and with due respect to democratic processes, it would have been sensible to have several other candidates to interview, and I thought that FSC values democratic processes. This may be a question directed more to the Committee on Ministry, but do you have any comment on this?
Sure. We looked at so I brought to you internal candidate processes from the major denominations. A lot of this was dictated by timelines. And just to play with an open hand, this was a question for both the search committee and the candidate. I also elected not to circulate my profile, much to the consternation of several groups of people. And we chose to spend time getting to yes or no before both sides of the equation entered into a full national search process. That felt fair to you and to me.
I would like to comment and say that the timeline was a factor, but it was not the largest factor. Due to our reading on search committees through multiple denominations, we discovered that most denominations suggest that you interview internal candidates before you widen the search. I ask you to think about any job application you've ever filled out. If you're an internal candidate and you're not interviewed, it can affect your ability to do the job. I'm not saying that would have happened with Nathan, but I'm saying it's a sign of respect to interview internal candidates before you open the search, because it can also, external candidates can also consider it unfair to be lumped in with an internal candidate. So we did it with much thought and with much support from other denominations and other search processes. Okay, another question? Jack?
Yeah, I have a question. Oh, wow. I have a question here from Marty Arnold for you, Nathan. It says, have your views or beliefs changed or evolved since you arrived at Fountain Street?
Yes. I know much more about what I don't know.
Not for lack of trying.
Yeah.
He's in the archives all the time, so.
And so I think one of the things that gets tricky when you go into graduate education in the field of theology specifically, but other fields like ethics, other fields like medicine, fields where you have reached a point where you've completed your broad liberal arts study and you have to drill down into something. At my graduate, for the 3 years I spent in Chicago, I was very focused on Reformed, Congregationalist, non-creedal, mainline church traditions, and that is by virtue of necessity. You cannot get a master's degree in comparative Buddhist theology along with a rabbinic degree, along with a background in liturgics, homiletics, theology, ecclesiology, Eastern theology, and like you're 95 years old by the time you've completed that. And because Fountain Street is a syncretic mix of different religious traditions and practices and rituals and values, there is no minister on the planet who can come here and meet that need honestly, faithfully. And so I have learned over the course of this last season where my own theology and practices are insufficient and what this place would need in terms of professional ministerial staff and clergy to be able to truly embrace these possibilities. So I guess that's my way of saying I've learned that I know a lot less about some of the religious backgrounds than I thought I did, even through that comparative religions degree that I earned. But I've also learned that there are a lot more liberals in Grand Rapids than I was brought up to believe. I started out just thinking that, well, you've got to have some sort of pressure release valve in a place like Grand Rapids. And so that's what Fountain Street's for. I mean, there's a really big, huge conservative church in Seattle, Washington, like maybe it's a similar, and it's not that at all. There's something about Grand Rapids that takes a very thoughtful and considerate approach to corporate religion and emergent spirituality, and this place has been a seedbed for that for ages. So I've learned a lot about Grand Rapids through this process that I didn't know, and that's also shaped me. And the last thing that has shaped me here, it has been seeing the many ways in which people can bring ideas into a church system that isn't rigid, and then those things can flourish and be successful. I used to joke, I don't say this anymore, but during the steps 2 and 3 of the interim process, I used to say that one of the things that's so hard about this church is that they're so good at doing things that they have no business being good at. I'll just pulling one. I'm not going to say the art committee because I'm talking to the two of you, but I'll say the art committee. The work of the art committee is something that you would see at a Third Presbyterian in Chicago, some kind of church that would have 3 or 4 staff people handling that with a professional background in it. You all just do it. And you don't even know that it's a miracle. You just do it. And you're like, well, every church has probably got this. And it's like, no, they don't. They don't have it. So that has helped me understand the way in which a lot of what professional ministers do, it just isn't, maybe it's not as special as we thought it was, I guess. So that's been a tremendous gift.
Other questions? Okay, it looks like we have a question from the live feed from someone named Jim, and he wants to know the burning question that all curious minds here want to know. How long do you envision serving here, Nathan?
That's a great question. I am 42 years old. I have been in professional ministry, and I've been a head of staff for 16 years, 17 years, and when I went to, so I don't do stepping stones. So that is one thing that I can say. There are many ways to be a professional clergy person in America, and one of the ones that really grinds my gears is this business of using a church to get to the next biggest church. I think that that is bad for everybody. And I've never actually seen that work out for any of my colleagues who have pursued that way of being. And I'm not organized enough to make a plan that complicated. I have always approached ministry in 2-year bites, whether it's been an interim project or a settled ministry. And I was in Kalamazoo for 8 years. But when I mapped that 8 years out, it was 4 separate 2-year bites that sort of overlapped on each other. And I had to wrestle with this question when Sahita came to that church in Kalamazoo, because part of that covenant that I made with her was that I was not going anywhere until she could walk free of that church. And that was a promise that Heather had to make as well, because we had children. It was a family promise. And then I had to tell Sahita, if they come here and take you to Pakistan, to Karachi, I'm on that flight as well. And then we're getting you to Germany or wherever we have to go. So that was a forever kind of commitment. This church has had great success with very long tenures. And that's an appealing thing for ministry candidates. So the easiest answer I can give to this to Jim is to say, as long as we are continuing to grow and build together. On the backside of that is also this sort of deep understanding that you can stay too long. You can, in church fixers, we'll call this standing on another's call. You are standing in the pulpit of a minister who has been called to that church. They may not know it, the church may not know it, but you know it. So I will remain here for as long as is needed, as necessary, and for as long as we are together continuing to see miracles happen. And given that this is a city that I have found to be endlessly fascinating, I'd love to stay here for the rest of I'd love to retire from this place. That'd be great, you know. I don't like moving. Yeah.
We have 2 questions.
I have a question here from George Zeiderbean. The question is regarding our unhoused neighbors that visit us during the week, and I guess there's been on a couple occasions that some have spent the night here, and how do we move forward with these type of scenarios?
With the unhoused folks here in the city. So the ongoing housing crisis in America in the urban cities is new. It shouldn't exist. It would be an absolute catastrophe if you brought a minister to Grand Rapids today from the 1970s, they would be utterly confused to see people sleeping on the street. It wasn't like that. We have collective amnesia about this. So that crisis needs to be laid at the feet of the city commission, the county board, and the state government and the federal government at every single opportunity. This isn't normal. This isn't okay. This is an emergency. Nobody should be sleeping rough, and the churches do not have the financial resources to end this problem. On the other side of that equation is the response of churches. And whenever we're talking about unhoused people, we're talking about humans. And so we have to think together collectively about what is this place for? What is its purpose? So I have said to the staff, for example, on Sunday morning, our purpose is worship. That's what we are doing on Sunday mornings. And we wish that we were a service location. We wish we had 6 social workers and a staffed kitchen and could meet all of the needs, right? When we talked together in the interim process about the portico, a year ago, there were 14 people sleeping out there. When we talked about that portico, we said, is this a shelter? Is this a residential shelter? Because I wouldn't let my animals sleep out there. It was wet and frigid. And I said, we can build a shelter. We can glass that off or close it off. We can bring people in and put beds in. I've turned big parts of churches into residential housing units before. I did it for an elderly woman with medical conditions. We can do that if that's what that's what this is for. But that's not what the portico was for. So then I talked to the people who were staying there. I talked to Keith and Raj, and I talked to John Kay, who passed away 6 months ago, and said, what would you do? And they were the ones who had this idea about housing and said, there's a way to do this, but we've got to bring somebody in here. And it was a member of this, it was Wynn Irwin, who made the connections between community rebuilders. And so we housed 14 people who they themselves believed were unhousable. Okay? And then we also installed a fence. And then that first night that fence went up, I stayed here. I slept on the bench by that front door, because the first person that came up to knock on that bench was going to have a place to sleep. We knocked on that door, and nobody came up. And so we did it. I think you have to do two things. You've got to humanize everyone. And the other thing that we had to do is we had to somehow break down this concept, first of all, that Fountain Streeters, that any of us are able to know when somebody is unhoused or not unhoused, because there are people who worship here on every single Sunday morning who look great, and you have no idea that they are sleeping in their car. And there's some trust fund babies that go to this church that haven't seen a shower in a couple weeks, and they get talked to as though they're sleeping rough, and then they're not. And the reality is you just don't know a lot of times what's going on in people's lives. But for as long as we had people sleeping on the portico, it was like there was the portico people, and nobody knew who they were, but everybody assumed that's who they were. We've done away with that, and so we've got people who we're integrating into the church who are part of the shelter system, but who are also, we have folks who are staying at 2 of the recovery centers that are residential treatment recovery centers here in town. We've got folks from Ransom Towers. We've got folks from other halfway houses. The men's shelter has folks coming here. So what do? We integrate them into the life of this church. We learn their first names, and then we give them a job. Give them something to do, just as we would any other human being who's coming here. And then we have collective understanding of our personal boundaries, and we're really crystal clear about the expectations for people who are coming here, not just for folks that are sleeping rough, but for everybody. And that's what Don and Dawn have been doing since the beginning of January with the 2 community navigators. Their role is to interact with folks. Not just folks who they think might be unhoused, but everybody who's here on Sunday morning. So it's hard. It's really, really hard. The easy thing to do is to shame the church members who are comfortable for having anxiety about feeling unsafe. The easy thing is to shake your finger at people and say, oh, I thought you were a liberal and blah, 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 blah. Or the easy thing to do is to slam the doors and have security guards and just push people away based on the way they're dressed. Neither of those things are going to wash. They won't work. They'll work in a church with 50 people. They won't work in a church with 1,500, right? So it's a very slow, arduous process of integration. But learning everybody's first name is step one. It's step one. It's really hard to dehumanize somebody if you know that their name is Joe or Becky or something like that. Right? So we'll just keep on, but be clear about boundaries, expectations, and the point of this place at any given time. What are we doing here? Right?
So, Aaron, I know you have another question, but let's make sure that nobody else has one first. Anybody else?
There are 2 more questions.
Okay, let me get those, and then we'll get back to you, Aaron. We have a question from Cammie. If there is a need for a less serious question, what is Nathan's preferred Dungeons and Dragons class?
I'm a paladin. I mean, come on. Wisdom, charisma, lawful good. I'm the worst class that you can have in your party. That's why I play as DM most of the time. Yeah. So.
All right, and we have a question from Jill M. How will, if at all, your activism impact Fountain Street?
I try to be really careful about my extracurricular commitments, not just because this is a big church, but also because I am the father of 3 small children, and that takes a lot of time. So right now, my board work is invested in Planned Parenthood of Michigan. My work with Planned Parenthood of Michigan is deeply personal at an almost biological level because of who my mother is and the work that she did, because she was a radical and somebody who has been fighting since Roe to make abortion access countrywide, nationwide. So that work that's my current board work. My activism is mainly around the same work that I used to do with the Gamaliel organization and with the Midwest Institute, which is teaching people how power works, their own, and the power that is right here in this room and in this city. Helping people understand the difference between being angry at the President of the United States of America and being angry at David LeGrand, who is the mayor of their city, right? Or getting involved in a county commission race. So that's part of my activism as well. But I also know that people burn out. And so if you force your activism into somebody else's lane, you're just setting them up for failure. The most important thing that anybody can do during the rise of fascism is to do that thing which they're really good at. Because fascism wants to universalize us and pack us into boxes. Right? So if you are an accountant, the resistance needs accountants. If you are a gardener, the resistance needs gardeners. If you are a social worker, a kindergarten teacher, somebody just showed up at a West Michigan Clergy Action meeting and solved 1 million problems by offering to organize childcare for protest events so that people could drop their kids off someplace safe with qualified professional childcare providers. And I'm going to try to help raise money for that so that those childcare providers can be paid, right? Okay, so that's the kind of activism that I'm really interested in, is connecting people with the necessary work that is almost always deeply unsexy. And you don't get to talk to the newspaper people about it, right? And then 1% of the people go around and get into street fights and do that kind of stuff. Maybe that has to happen too, but it's the logistics piece that gets lost, not so much.
Okay, questions? Tony has a question. Up here.
Oh, he's going back there. Oh, Tony, yeah.
Hi, this is Tony Kroos. How's that pronounced? You want me to ask a question? I'm going to ask it so it's on the mic. Tony's question: as a child of the church, what is your vision of the child? What do you call it? Character school going forward.
The character school is another one of these miracles of the moment, when you would anticipate that many churches here would be doing stuff that they're not doing, and you're sort of running around. I say this as a parent, right, who wants his children to be exposed to the liberal arts and ethics and science-based sex education and all of this other stuff that used to be available to us in the 1990s that somehow is no longer available. The character school is probably one of the greatest opportunities that is before Fountain Street Church today. And you also have the added bonus of being able to do it in an age when the public schools and the sort of pseudo-public schools are unwilling to do it. That is a tremendous opportunity. The only similar opportunity in recent history that I can find was 1943, 44, and 45, when a previous minister, when Duncan Littlefair came and said, we have to develop a robust children's program, and the church, the ones that were there, responded with, you're crazy, there's no kids here. And he had the foresight to realize that hundreds of thousands of new families would be forming very, very soon, and that a wave of children would be coming. And they did it, and it filled up, and it filled up quickly. And he said, you have to make a middle school and a high school program. And the same answer came back. We don't have middle school and high school kids. And he said, you've got 3, 4, 5 years before these kids are there. And so if you see, today we didn't have a lot of kids up here because most of them were in the OWL class, getting positive science-based sex education. And those kids will be middle schoolers before you know it. And there will be a program here for them because you've got a couple years to build it, to get it ready. So that's the stuff like the children's character school. You have to have a 10-year plan for that. It's a big thing. And there's so many miracles happened in the 50s with Verdi and Reeser and with Jack Bowers. The big one is that they both, Verdi and Jack, knew about the character development model at the same time, and Verdi couldn't make it work. He couldn't get the flames going. And then Duncan got Jack to come back from Dallas, and Verdi didn't just take his ball and go home. He stayed. And they got it going. It was miraculous. You can do that again. The need is absolutely tremendous. And in fact, it's tremendous in everything. Because if you try to take I don't know how many people here have little kids, you try to get your kids signed up for a summer program, it's impossible. There's wait lists, and then even if you get them in, it's $1 billion for whatever thing when they're going to take them and teach them a couple songs or go on a hike or whatever. It's insane. So there's this huge need right now, right? And no competition. So that's really important. And you're attracting the right kind of people too, for your staffing and your childcare stuff. They're awesome. They're great. Yeah.
Okay, Aaron, you still remember your question?
I have written it down, yeah.
Okay.
Can we get a mic for Aaron?
Yep.
You got to tell Jack, I think it's this.
Okay, we have another question here from Aaron Wiesner. With every journey, there must be a clear vision for the destination. A road trip to Disney World has a vision. For retired life, one has a vision, both a hope, dream, vision, and a realistic belief vision. What is your positive vision for the future of humanity and the world as a whole?
No, that's great. I like that. It's not Mars. I said to somebody right after church that one of the things I left on the editing room floor for this sermon was one of the differences between the crisis they went through in 1970 and the fascism that we're dealing with today. And the big thing in 1970 that just was just keeping Duncan up at night was that the fight that was happening in 1970 was a generational fight. The battle lines were drawn between people who were under the age of 30 and people who were over the age of 40, and they were ready to murder each other. And you had people in their mid-30s just freaking out and trying to get their kids to school, okay? Today, we are in a much better location as a culture, as a species, to have intergenerational solidarity. And intergenerational solidarity is alien to our sort of capitalist finance capital structure in the US, because right now in society, when you have a relationship with somebody who's 20 years older than you, that's either your parent or your boss, right? But I have friendships with guys that are in their late 70s, and they're my fishing buddies, and we drink cheap beer together, and I don't take their advice. These guys are not my surrogate grandpas. They're my buds, and I love them, and I'll help them out if they need it. But that is a kind of relationship there. Right? You need mentors, of course, you've got to have that, right? But cultivating intergenerational friendships is really important. That's happening at the protests. So nobody's talking about this, but when you look at the streets of Minneapolis, there are 16-year-olds, 35-year-olds, and 75-year-olds, and like 90-year-olds, and they're all carrying similar signs. That's never happened in U.S. history. That's a big deal. So for the future, my hope is this. It's a couple of really sort of, they sound like boring, unsexy things, but radical hospitality and intergenerational solidarity will literally save the planet. Literally save the planet. So that's my hope and vision for humans, is that we can just break down these silos. We're just invented by marketing people to sell us stuff we don't need.
Jack, you have a question that was submitted.
Yes, I have a question here from, was submitted on a card, Joan Young, or Jung. Would you consider sources of spiritual wisdom other than being so traditionally Christian by using only Christian scriptures in Sunday services? and she puts a little anecdote at the end. Most of us are seeking a change from that.
We did, so I think I shared some of this with the search committee, but in December we completed a survey of all of the source materials for a couple different seasons of worship. We looked at May through the beginning of Advent, because Lent and Advent tend to be pretty Christian-y liturgical seasons here. And the analysis that was done examined everything that happens at the 11 o'clock service. The hymns, the poems, the words, 15 of the sermons were put into the mill. All the stuff that happens, the choral pieces, right? Where's this stuff coming from? Who wrote it, right? We looked at gender. We looked at what age it came from. We looked at what part of the world it came from. And we looked at its religious roots, right? And what we discovered was about 50% of what goes on here on a given Sunday is in the orbit of Christianity. Now, the cool thing about that is that it wasn't Reformed Protestant Christianity. A lot of it was very Eastern Orthodox. A lot of it was very mystical. A lot of it was feminist liberation literature, and a lot of it was queer Christian sources from the last 20 years. So that 50% that is Christianish here on a Sunday morning is extremely diverse and representative of the full scope and canon of Christianity. And Christianity is a majority person of color religion, right? I didn't have to explain this stuff, but I'm in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Most Christians are not white, right? There are 2.7 billion Christians on earth right now, right? And it is very myopic to believe that the majority of them are biblical literalists, believe in eternal conscious torment or damnation, that the majority of them are white or politically conservative or anything like that. The majority of them aren't. Your average Christian is a brown person living in the two-thirds world, and that has been the case for a very long time. Setting that aside, we looked at then about 15% of the content was explicitly Unitarian Universalist. 10% of the content was explicitly what we call spiritual humanism, which is a beautiful term for, humanism's not flat. I mean, it's atheist, but it's good. I love it's great, yeah. Yeah, and then we had about 10% was Jewish, about 10% was pan-Islamic stuff. So we're doing this analysis. There's so much more that could be brought in to these services and that could be embraced. But the thing about Fountain Street is that the things that don't work here, the things that they bring in that don't take off, are the religious stuff that's for spectators, right? What doesn't work here is when you curate a museum of religious artifacts for people to come in and sort of gawk at and then go away and say, that was really beautiful and interesting. What does work here is when you ask people to bring the religious thing that they practice themselves in their life and do that thing here. That works. It works. So that's why I've been turning myself inside out to try to develop a theological survey for this church that will actually have legs and will work. So the answer is yes, we need it. But we also need opportunities for Fountain Streeters to write their stuff, to develop their rituals, and to then bring it home, bring it here, and do it. Mm-hmm.
We have a question over here, please.
Yeah, I think Bo's got a...
Let me get your name first. Bo Jones. Am I on? Can you hear me? Okay,
Yes.
good. Bo Jones is asking this question. I'm going to read it. I have talked to you about community through the arts. Film and music has been my focus, but also we've talked about outreach to the youth through gaming and other activities that are appealing to the Gen Z and future young people. Could you speak to how you intend to reach the youth when so many of my generation are immediately turned off by events that take place in a church or even in a church, or even if a church is involved?
Yeah, so we've got the 60,000 square feet of space in here, and this room gets the most use, and this is the most explicitly religious room. But so the first step was to get this building breathing again. That means hundreds of people know how to open it up and close it up and turn on the lights and set up tables and chairs and take them down and use the dishwasher and find a mop when something breaks and sweep stuff up and do that stuff. Because that just can't be. So the building's breathing. There's stuff happening here every single day of the week. People are coming and going, right? Then the next step is to begin this effort of finding and reaching out to the people who have been shut out of other places. So I'll pick one example out of the hat. The EDM goth thing that was in late November. I came to that. It was great. It was here in the sanctuary. It was like almost a festival. It was about 250 people. It was a beautiful event that had been happening in other places around town, had been shut out because of landlordism and rent seeking. They couldn't afford to make the beautiful thing happen downtown, and so it had no place to go. And we said, well, maybe do it here. Okay, and that went pretty well. It went pretty well. So with like I think about game nights, right, and even like amateur competitive gaming, that stuff gets hosted in breweries because breweries want to sell beer for $7 a pull, right, and that's why that's hosted there, right. But that's not, none of the organizers are saying, oh, we've got to find a brewery to have this in. They just need folding tables and a roof over their head. Right? So we can have that here if we can make the space, if we can facilitate it. And the Kale Clements and the folks that are working on the 3rd and 4th floor are keeping that mindset of how do we set this space up to welcome the people who aren't here yet, right? With the anticipation that they're going to come.
Okay, questions? Anybody? Looks like there's one here. Hi, this is Dan B. What are 1 or 2 areas of focus that we need maybe as a community?
Yeah, so where we need as a community, what Fountain Street needs is a website, but we're working on that. That's happening. If we think about the future of Fountain Street and what will sustain growth, the biggest growing edge for this community, and this is going to go into my final interim report, is in the area that we call pastoral care and visitation, right? And this is a hang-up that is not anyone's fault. So Fountain Street has a big footprint. It has a much bigger footprint than any church I've ever served. There are people who come here on Sunday who drive an hour from every direction. So if we map out Fountain Street, it's a 2-hour drive from one side of the map to the other. When I'm serving a properly staffed church, I'm usually visiting with between 6 and 10 people a week. Maybe 4 or 5 of them are in hospital. Maybe another 4 or 5 of them are what we used to call homebound, where they can't come to church. This is a thing that we need very much. We need Fountain Streeters in other Fountain Streeters' homes, but it's hard when the church is this big. Geographically. Some of you remember what David Lee Smith was able to build here. And David Lee Smith was doing some incredible work. That's something that absolutely has to happen, and it can't wait. There's too many Fountain Streeters who have been sitting at home for 2 years and know that there's something happening at that church and feel like no one's telling them what's going on, right? And I'm going and visiting as many of them as I can. But I don't always know who I should visit. Sometimes I get done visiting somebody, and I'm like, thank you, you can always come back to church. And they'll say, oh, I haven't been there in 20 years, but thanks for coming and visiting me, whatever. And so we need to ramp that up as a community, and we're going to do it. It's already getting started. It's happening. And then the last thing that I'll say, I already said, but continuing to focus on the character school, developing that, and then opening that up to the community. Because it's hard to communicate. These programs are available for you and your kids, but you don't have to swear an oath or donate to the church or sign the book to take advantage of these programs. They're for you. And plus, we're not going to be weird when you come here. It's real hard to convince people of that. I mean, we'll be weird in the cool Fountain Street way, but we're not going to teach your kids about the devil or whatever. There's a lot of weird in churches around that stuff. So, yeah.
Jack, do you have another written question? Okay. Oh, Kurt Elliott, who is a member of the Committee on Ministry, Can you share your vision of how you see the future involvement of more ministers at Fountain Street Church?
So more ministers for Fountain Street. So there's about 800 people in the orbit of Fountain Street Church, right? So if we said, how many Fountain Streeters are there? There's about 800. And that tracks with your worship attendance, right? And there's a lot of math. You just take the worship attendance times 2.5, and then there's other math that you do. I'm not supposed to minister to more than 200 people max. And these days, it's supposed to be 160, which is impossible, right? So we need more ministers, okay? Now, because this is Fountain Street Church, these are going to have to be very smart and creative people, right, who are going to have to bring a lot of gifts, and they're going to have a lot of sets of passion. One of the things that they can't want is denominational merit badges. They can't be hunting a gold star from the bishop. And they're going to have to be people who are competent and professional enough to minister to a very, very smart church filled with professional people who know what they're looking for. So one of the areas that we need to think about is people who have a background in the counseling professions, people who have a much more robust background than me, especially in indigenous and First Nation religions, a background in Eastern faith traditions. By that I mean the Asiatic traditions, Buddhist, Vedic faiths, things like that. And then individuals who have competency in administration and leadership roles as well. So I think that the wonderful thing about Fountain Street is that you can have a cadre of ministers who, maybe if they serve here for a while, maybe it's like an Eagle Scout thing where you always get to say that you were a Fountain Street minister, and that's like a badge that they earn. And but the other great thing about this is that the church is ready for a team approach to ministry. Right? The church is ready to step away from this concept of the senior minister as like the heir pastor, king of the mountain sort of thing. That's gone. That future's gone. And even if it wasn't gone and people wanted it, those jobs are gone. They're gone. They're done. The era of the massive, the big churches that you get, even Riverside has about 150 people in worship on any given Sunday. So that age is over. It is over. It is done. So team ministry is no longer like a hoped-for vision. It's the thing that we do. And that's good. That's fine. That's the way that communities have been cared for thousands of years, right? The great, huge senior minister glory days was an aberration. It was a weird thing that we did from about 1930 to 1980. So I think that it's going to have to be people who are creative, motivated, driven, urgent, have a sense of urgency, and who are very good at speaking a lot of different theological languages all at once. I can't wait to meet them. And I can't find them for you, because if we do away with that senior minister thing, the era of the senior minister picking some baby ministers to come and be loyal to them instead of the congregation, that's done. That's over as well. You have to find them. You are responsible. You have to call them and affirm their call, right? And then it is the responsibility of the rest of the professional ministers on staff to work with them, because they weren't called by the ministers. They were called by the church. Right? Now.
Okay, questions? We have one back here. Anybody else have a question? You can line up.
While we're gathering this question, we have time for about 1-2 more questions, and we're going to have a quick close. So just if you have something you'd like to say or ask, we'll take maybe one more after this one.
I can do the, is there, oh, I thought there was.
There it is.
Nope, it's back. How
right.
do you find joy and practice a sense
Yep, this is
Sabbath?
from top.
I find joy by preparing for it. Joy has to be unplanned. Happiness can be planned, but joy must come unexpected. I think I read that in a Thich Nhat Hanh book. And so I try to find joy by taking joy in things that I discover. Sabbath is a little bit more complicated and it's something that I continue to work on all the time. But I have found Fountain Street to be a place that honors Sabbath rest and takes it very, very seriously. So I take Fridays off right now, and will continue to do so.
You
When I
ready,
can.
Jack?
Okay, we have a question here from Keith Paluskas, and the question is, hopefully I'm going to word this properly, is, and I've seen this in many surveys from Fountain Street, is how do we go about making our membership and congregation more diverse in a racially and ethnic way with people of color attending our services?
That's a great and important question. And I think that there's a wrong way to do it. And I think we know more about the wrong way to do it than we know about the right way to do it. So the wrong way to do it is to try to poach or to try to adopt a posture of a church that you're not. And imagine that people who are part of a different church community already are going to somehow find you more appealing. The right way to do it is to model it in who leads, in what you celebrate. But I also think that there are things that Fountain Street already is that appeals to people who aren't part of this community already. I'm thinking about specifically when churches in the United Church of Christ became open and affirming in a very public way. They became more interracial, right? Because being a gay person does not discriminate according to your racial affiliation and identity. So that's one thing that can happen. It's just sharing who this place is. But churches are still extremely segregated in the United States of America, and continuing to gain literacy and fluency in the history of that without trying with a mind to not doing harm, for example, to the historic black churches here in town. St. Luke's AME right now, right? That's the Underground Railroad Church here in town. It's the oldest black church in this part of the state. They are aware of that. They are better at telling their history than lots of folks here are, right? They're proud of that. They're doing great work. And so if a person who's new to Grand Rapids, who's looking for a black church experience, approaches me and says, I want rich history, I want a historic black church experience in worship, I'm probably going to recommend that they check out St. Luke AME, right? I know their minister. However, if I meet a person who is practicing Buddhist but loves church organs, so that's okay. It doesn't really, I said, well, yeah, I mean, there's kind of one option for you at this point. So my answer is to do the beautiful and good things that you do, and tell and share that message as broadly and as widely as you possibly can.
Okay. One last call for questions. All right, you did very good. I'm going to hand the mic over to Jan.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Kathy. Before we conclude, I just want to ask if we can show our appreciation for the AV staff, Kel Clements, and everyone else for helping us do this. Believe me, the committee couldn't have done it. I want to thank the participants on the live stream, the people who wrote out their questions on 4x6 cards, all of you for being here, and for those who will watch the video in the future. It's important that we all participate. And Nathan, do you have anything in closing that you want to say, or are you out of words there?
No, I think that the only thing I'd say is just please, as you go from here, remember that far fewer people that you meet in your day-to-day life know about Fountain Street Church than you might assume. This church does have a habit of assuming that everybody already knows about it, and so if they wanted to, they'd be here. That is neither accurate nor true. Most Grand Rapids people don't know about Fountain Street Church. So tell them, let them know.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.